Fred realized he had committed the gravest error of his life, and now the owner of the facilities firm where he worked demanded to see him immediately. He rose from his chair and made his way to Bill Robinson's office, his mind racing with apprehension. There was no conceivable way Bill could have discovered his actions. As the accountant and general manager, Fred was the only one who delved into the intricate details of the company's transactions, ensuring that all the accounts balanced at the end of each month. Fred felt a cold sweat and a sense of nausea as he reluctantly knocked on the door. He reassured himself that Bill never bothered to scrutinize the detailed accounts unless there was an obvious discrepancy in the balance sheets. Bill was always more preoccupied with his designer suits, fast cars, and chasing women. As Fred entered, he saw Bill's serious expression and was immediately disabused of any illusion of safety. "So I suppose the question I need to ask is, how long have you been embezzling from me?" Bill's voice was stern. Fred's head began to spin. "What? I have no idea what you're talking about," he blurted out, his denials flowing without conviction. However, Bill produced the transaction logs, proving that a significant amount of money had spent some time in one of Fred's personal accounts before being paid back into the company. Fred knew the jig was up. He had been caught red-handed. "I'm truly sorry, Bill," Fred confessed. "I just needed a short-term loan until the bridging company came through. Otherwise, we would have lost the new house Lucy had set her heart on. I never intended to steal it. I paid it back as soon as I could and before the end of the month. I don't know what they'll classify it as. Fred. Theft, I guess, or fraud. But you could be looking at jail time. Even without that, you're looking at losing your job. I can't possibly trust you after this," Bill stated solemnly. "Please, give me a chance." It was a moment of madness. "I've worked for the company for almost 20 years and have never thought of doing anything like this before, and I wouldn't do it again," Fred pleaded. Bill stood and looked out the window, seemingly lost in deep contemplation. "You and Lucy have been my friends for a long time. I guess that makes this all the more disappointing." "Did Lucy know you did this?" Fred was taken aback by the question. He thought back. It was actually Lucy's idea. She was so desperate not to lose the house that she suggested it, convincing Fred that no one could ever find out. Fred thought involving Lucy might mean Bill wouldn't report it to the police, but he didn't want to implicate her. After a long pause, he said, "No, she didn't. It was my idea." Bill seemed surprised by Fred's response, but let it pass. "I need time to think this through. Fred, I'm not sure what to do for the best. Go home. Don't come back in for the rest of the week. I'll make a decision on Friday." On his way home, Fred couldn't figure out how Bill had found out. No one ever looked at the transactions, and Bill certainly didn't delve into details. His primary concern was which option Bill would choose. None of them were very appealing, but the shame of a court case and time in prison left him in a blind panic. He knew Lucy wouldn't be expecting him. He looked at their new home as he approached, deeply regretting buying the place in the first place. Suddenly, he recalled all those stories where a guy comes home early to find his wife having an affair. Wouldn't that just cap off a perfect day? As he walked into the kitchen, Fred was relieved to find Lucy her usual bright and sunny self, fully clothed. He couldn't help but marvel at her beauty once again. Just shy of her 40th birthday, her long curly brown hair was pinned up, her fringe resting over a pair of deep brown eyes. He found her figure more appealing now, with a few more curves and a lot more cleavage than when they were first married. But above all, he loved her smile, a smile he feared he might soon remove for the foreseeable future. Fred updated Lucy on his discussions with Bill and the damning evidence he had uncovered. "God, honey, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. It was my idea, all for this stupid house," Lucy responded. Fred shrugged. "I told Bill you didn't know anything. There's no point in getting us both into trouble." "Maybe if I spoke to him and pleaded," Lucy suggested. Fred thought about it and suggested they wait. He knew the next 3 days were going to be the longest of his life. They could try pleading if Bill chose to go the destructive route. Fred thought about it and suggested they wait. He knew the next 3 days were going to be the longest of his life. They could try pleading if Bill chose to go the destructive route. He wondered what he would do if he were in Bill's shoes. They were friends outside of work, often going out and attending parties together. Maybe that would give him a slim chance. Bill texted to say he would come to their home at 7 p.m. on Friday. Both Fred and Lucy were sick with anticipation. Bill's Porsche 911 pulled onto the drive exactly on time. The man with everything. Fred mused silently. Good looks, money, the ability to charm, and now the power to destroy him. He greeted Bill with strained pleasantries, while Lucy offered him a beer as usual. Before Bill could say anything, Fred dove in. I just want to say how very sorry I am, Bill. I let you and myself down badly. I understand I've put you in an impossible position, and I'll cope with whatever you decide. Bill gave a strange smile. I do hope that's true, Fred. The following silence stretched on, becoming unbearable, before Bill finally spoke again. You know, Fred, I'm a bit jealous of you. Your relationship with Lucy, I miss that in my life. Fred was surprised. He always thought Bill had it all, including an endless line of hot girlfriends. Maybe nearing 30, he was looking to settle down. So it's with that in mind that I have a proposal. Neither of you will like it, but it's the only scenario where you can avoid a prison sentence. Fred. And remember, there's a risk to Lucy as well, as it was a joint account and used to secure the house in both your names. Also, I know you wouldn't have done this without her approval. Fred panicked at the thought of Lucy being held accountable. He had no idea what the proposal could possibly involve. Bill let out a slow, long breath. There's no easy way to say this, but my proposal involves me spending time with Lucy. There was stunned silence. Bill continued, no police, no court cases or prison. You stay employed and you two stay together, but I get to spend every Friday night with her. You can't possibly be serious, whispered Fred. I'm deadly serious. I've desired Lucy for all these years, and this is an opportunity I just can't resist, Bill said. Lucy interjected. There must be another option. We can pay more back, anything but. This is my only offer, Bill interrupted. I'm told I'm not a bad-looking guy. Hopefully, it won't be too much of a hardship for you. Maybe once things settle down, the arrangement won't be too uncomfortable for any of us. We need time to consider it. We can't decide something like this quickly, Lucy said. Fred's head spun around. You can't be thinking of agreeing to this, babe. Are you crazy? I don't see any alternatives, Fred, and we've been trying to think of them all week, Lucy replied. Fred seethed as he looked at Bill. You miserable low-life scum. It's a sick idea. Bill smiled. That may be true, Fred, but I'm not a thief. You are, though. Turning to Lucy, Bill said, if we're doing this, we need to start now. No time for you to think of a way to squirm out of it. After 15 minutes of shouting and accusations, Bill stood up. It's decision time. I'm either walking out to my car or upstairs with Lucy, he said, holding out his hand towards her. After a hesitation, Lucy took it. Fred was literally staggered and sat back harshly on the chair. There's no alternative, Fred. It will be okay, Lucy said, then led Bill through the living room and up the stairs. Time seemed to stop for Fred. There was a frightening silence in the room. Had this conversation really just happened? His thoughts jumped to what was happening upstairs. He heard them moving around, a muffled conversation, and then the distinct sound of someone sitting on the bed. Long minutes passed in silence. Then he heard the first creak of the bed, the unmistakable sound of two people lying on it. The movements and sounds continued. Then the creaking became regular, faster, and louder. There seemed to be no end to it, and Fred thought he might go mad. Then the sound stopped, and that meant only one thing. Bill had achieved his goal. Fred felt overwhelmed by shame and guilt as he dried his cheeks and eyes, expecting Bill and Lucy to return downstairs. Again, there was muffled conversation and movement. After a long silence, Fred stood, thinking he should check if Lucy was okay, when he heard something again, the bed squeaking. He had to get out of the house. He rushed out and walked aimlessly. Was Lucy actually enjoying it, or was she putting on a show for Bill? He started to wonder how vigorously she had argued against the idea. The fact that Bill was 10 years his junior and handsome wasn't lost on him. By the time he reached the park, his thoughts had changed. Lucy was doing this to keep him out of jail. He needed to get back to the house and, as much as possible, make sure she was okay. The Porsche was still there, but the house was quiet as he entered. He went through to the kitchen and grabbed a beer. Turning, he saw Lucy behind him in a short robe. They looked at each other, both embarrassed, before Fred managed to speak. "Are you okay?" Lucy gave a flicker of a smile. "I am. Thanks for checking," she said, then continued. "He's acting normal, nothing rude or weird. I'm sorry if you could hear things." Fred shrugged. "At least it's over." Lucy looked awkward. Actually, he wants to go again. He was thirsty, so I came for a beer. And I wanted to check on you." "Jesus, he must have been saving this up for you," Fred remarked. Lucy suggested, "Why don't you go to the den? It might be easier for you, quieter maybe. See if you can think of a way out of this." Fred spent another hour in the den, but he hadn't made any progress on a solution when he heard footsteps descending the stairs. He stepped into the hall and saw Bill, who was struggling to hide a smile before he spoke, breaking the tense silence. "Listen, I know this isn't easy for you, Fred. I promised to treat Lucy with utmost respect, and I really appreciate you allowing me to spend time with her. I hope it gets easier for you, and our work issues will remain between us." Raging inside, Fred replied, "Don't thank me. You left us no choice at all." Bill and Lucy both looked uncomfortable. It was clearly time for him to leave. To Fred's surprise, as Bill said goodbye, Lucy kissed him. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but it was on the lips and lingered for a moment. Before Fred could react, Bill had already left. He turned to Lucy. What was that all about? Lucy realized she had made a mistake. What? Oh, it was just a goodbye kiss. No, it wasn't just that. It was a sign of affection. I suppose you had a good time after all, and I shouldn't have been so concerned. Lucy grew angry. I can't believe your boss just slept with me, and because of your actions, you're worried about a goodbye kiss. Fred countered. It's supposed to be a deal, an arrangement. Did you make out with him upstairs? Some, I guess. Not much, Lucy replied. Great. First, it's multiple times, then I hear you enjoying it. And now it's affection, Fred retorted. Lucy erupted. It's not like that. Everything I'm doing is to keep us out of jail. I have to show willingness and make sure he enjoys it. Plus, I can't help but react if he's doing that to me. It's not exactly something I can control. We both need to adjust to this. If I can put myself through this, then you need to find a way to cope with it too. Fred felt drained after the last comment. Despite his doubts about Lucy's actions, she was the one making the sacrifice, not him. If she left, where would he be? Probably in jail. Facing the master bedroom was unbearable for Fred, knowing what had happened there. So they slept in the guest room, holding each other close. Lucy fell asleep quickly, clearly exhausted. But Fred lay awake all night, his mind swirling with thoughts, desperately seeking a way out of this nightmare. The following week felt like they barely spoke. Their conversation centered on how to escape their predicament. Fred came up with various plans, most of them useless. Even when he thought of a viable solution, Bill always seemed one step ahead. Once, Fred suggested destroying all the evidence, only to discover that Bill had cut off his access to the backups and had backed up all the financials to a new secure cloud system. Finally, Friday arrived. confirmed by a text from Bill saying he planned to take Lucy out for a meal, suggesting it might be easier to handle. Fred wasn't sure if it was easier. On one hand, a date felt more like a normal relationship, but on the other, it meant less time in bed with Lucy. As it turned out, he got the worst of both scenarios. Lucy seemed subdued about the date, but she got ready anyway. Fred thought she put in too much effort and looked too good when Bill arrived to pick her up. Watching her in a little black dress and slingback heels, being helped into Bill's Porsche 911, was heart-wrenching. The evening that followed was even worse. Fred sent multiple texts to Lucy, asking if she was okay. Each time, he received a short response saying she was fine, just having a meal or drinks. They eventually returned at 10 p.m. Bill had his arm around Lucy as they entered, both laughing and seemingly in a good mood. Fred's glare intensified as Lucy appeared to be enjoying herself a bit too much, clearly intoxicated. "We never agreed these were dates," Fred muttered. Bill replied, "Relax, Fred, it was just dinner and drinks between friends. If this is going to be awkward, maybe we better go straight on up." Fred seethed. "What do you mean by straight up?" Bill's smile returned. "The deal was every Friday." "Fred, so I'll be staying with Lucy tonight. I'm sure you can manage in the spare room." Lucy, despite her inebriation, sensed the tension. Worried Fred might confront Bill, Lucy, sensing the tension, steered him into the kitchen, whispering, "It'll be okay, Fred. I'll handle it quickly and then pretend to be passed out. We don't have much choice." Feeling powerless, Fred retreated to the den. Upstairs, he heard Lucy's giggles, hoping they were just for show, but he couldn't shake the thought that they might be for Bill, or worse, for him. Exhausted, Fred finally fell asleep in the spare room. Each time he woke up, he heard the bed squeaking down the hall. So much for a quick resolution. In the morning, Fred found Bill already at the table and Lucy making breakfast. He had had enough. "Back off, Bill. It's not Friday, and your time is up," Fred declared. Lucy started to speak, but Fred cut her off. "You have 10 seconds to get out of my house." Bill looked like he wanted to argue but opted to leave instead. As he left, he threw a reminder at Fred. "Don't forget what's at stake here, Fred." Fred turned to Lucy incredulously. "Making him breakfast? Really? You've got to be kidding me. Why don't you just move him in? You're more his wife than mine now." He stormed out before she could even formulate a reply. For the third consecutive Friday, Bill suggested they spend the night at a hotel to avoid further confrontations with Fred. Lucy left at 6 p.m., dressed casually, hoping to make things easier on Fred again. The plan was to change at the hotel, and Bill would meet her in the restaurant. Upon arriving, Lucy was surprised by the opulence of the hotel. Her casual attire seemed out of place. She picked up the key for the pre-booked room, only to find out it was a suite. A box on the bed contained a very expensive and glamorous full-length silver satin dress with a scoop neck and thigh-high slit. Though hesitant, Lucy decided to try it on. Surprisingly, it fit perfectly, and she couldn't deny feeling stunning in it. She resolved to keep it on and headed down to the restaurant. Bill was speechless at how stunning Lucy looked when he met her. The dinner and wine that followed were exquisite, with a charged atmosphere, knowing what was to come later. Lucy found herself more at ease with Bill, deciding to go along with the scenario rather than resist it. Returning to the room, Lucy realized that Bill was an attentive and passionate lover, exuding a confidence and allure she had never experienced with her husband. The next morning, Lucy changed back into her casual clothes. She explained to Bill that she couldn't risk taking the dress home. Bill agreed to keep it at his house for Lucy to use in the future. As Lucy sighed, she recognized that this arrangement would be long-term. Her emotions were in turmoil, unsure of how she truly felt. Guilt was present, but so was a sense of excitement and fulfillment that she couldn't deny. Fred lay awake for most of Friday night, and by Saturday morning at 10 a.m., Lucy still hadn't returned. Once again, she had breached their agreement. Fred doubted whether Bill would have resisted taking Lucy again that morning, and he wasn't convinced she would even try to avoid it. Try as he might to resist it, he was losing trust in Lucy, and if that happened, it could mean the end of his marriage. He had never felt so distant from Lucy or so alone. Lucy reflected on the kiss that turned out to be a colossal mistake, upsetting Fred more than anything else. And then there was the breakfast for Bill. What on earth was I thinking? In fact, she was starting to believe the whole arrangement was a terrible idea. From her perspective, her time with Bill was easier than expected. He was respectful, handsome, and exciting, and the money and cars certainly added to the outer. She had always longed for the finer things. She had hoped Fred would adjust to the situation and come to his senses, but 3 weeks had passed, and he was still just as moody. She loved him dearly and regretted the predicament they were now in. She had tried to reassure Fred that she was managing, and he shouldn't feel guilty. She mentioned that Bill treated her well and wasn't trying to keep them apart, but it had no effect. Fred seemed defeated and lost. His once steady, reassuring presence in her life was becoming a distant memory. When Bill arrived at work on Monday, he informed Fred that he needed to cover an out-of-town training event on Wednesday and Thursday of that week. Fred's suspicions immediately arose, but given his precarious work position, he had no choice but to agree to cover it. "Okay, I can cover it, but just to be clear, this doesn't affect our personal arrangement. You can't visit when I'm away," Fred said firmly. Bill replied, "No, of course not." That night, when Fred informed Lucy, she didn't seem particularly surprised or concerned. While training events weren't uncommon, occurring once or twice a year, it all felt too convenient to Fred. He retreated to the den, his intention of planning a way out of the predicament warring against a blinding headache. As he climbed the stairs to find some painkillers, he overheard Lucy on the phone, catching only her side of the conversation. He couldn't help but wonder who she was talking to and listened intently to her part of the conversation. "What are you doing, sending Fred away?" "No, it's a terrible idea. This situation isn't working out, and your presence will only make it worse. He hasn't come up with any other solutions. It seems like he's given up and resigned to things. This isn't how I expected things to go. He's absolutely devastated. You know I enjoy our time together. I suggested it, but I didn't anticipate him being this upset. It was supposed to be a safe alternative to us having an affair without the risk of being caught. I didn't mean for all of this to happen. I didn't help matters with the kisses and breakfasts, and you've been unnecessarily cocky at times, flaunting it in his face. Fine, you can come over during the trip, but then I think we'll have to dial it back and be more discreet, or maybe even end it. If you're willing to end things because you see how it's affecting Fred, then you can be the good guy, and we can go back to normal. Perhaps if we're discreet, we could still meet occasionally. We'll talk later, but I really need to mend things with Fred. I still love him." Fred staggered back down the stairs, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. Did he really just hear all of that? He couldn't quite grasp all the implications. It was no surprise that Bill seemed to anticipate all his plans. Lucy was keeping him informed ahead of time, and it was her idea from the start. She had suggested it and persuaded Fred to borrow the money against his better judgment. That also explained how Bill found the discrepancy in the first place. It was so well hidden that he didn't think even an audit could uncover it. Far from being married to a saint who prevented him from going to prison, he was, in fact, married to a conniving cheat. Thoughts of revenge and violence raced through his mind. Feeling overwhelmed, he knew he had to calm down and think rationally. He needed a plan, one where they would feel some of his unease. Fred avoided Lucy for the rest of the night and the following morning. When he saw Lucy on Tuesday night, he didn't mention the overheard conversation, but instead said he'd heard Bill at work, bragging about having a first-class mistress. Fred continued, saying he could only hope Bill hadn't mentioned Lucy by name. Fred left early for the trip on Wednesday, with Lucy telling him she loved him. He managed a brief smile and pretended to be distracted by checking his schedule on his phone as he set off. Bill arrived at Lucy's later on Wednesday morning, and she immediately asked about the boasting, but Bill denied all knowledge of it, accusing Fred of stirring things up. Lucy wasn't sure who to believe. She couldn't see any reason for Fred to make that up. Maybe Bill was less discreet than she thought, which would be problematic. They discussed the situation and what could be done about it. Lucy lacked the emotional connection she had with Fred, and what she had with Bill had been reduced to a purely physical relationship. Before leaving on Thursday afternoon, Bill had convinced Lucy to continue their affair, but Lucy made it clear that it would be their last time together until they got their relationship with Fred in order. As Bill left the house, he froze in disbelief at the sight before him. Embedded in the gleaming hood of his Porsche 911 was a large kitchen knife, standing upright. He scanned the area, finding no one around. All 4 tires had been slashed as well. Rushing back inside, he informed Lucy. Panic set in as they wondered if Fred had returned early and discovered something. It seemed likely, unless it was the work of kids or someone envious of the flashy car. Vandalism wasn't new to them. Lucy called Fred, asking about his course. He nonchalantly mentioned its dullness, stating he was on his way back. He didn't inquire about Bill and sounded calm. Lucy concluded that maybe it was just kids after all. Regardless, they needed to tow the car before Fred's return, resulting in frantic calls and hefty fees. Things seemed normal when Fred returned on Thursday night. Lucy treaded carefully, playing the dutiful wife. It came as a surprise when Bill messaged, expressing his intention to come over on Friday to discuss their situation. Lucy hoped Bill would end things. Perhaps the incident with the car had shaken him enough. Friday morning, Fred left for work as usual. At 11 a.m., he called Lucy in a panicked voice, urging her to see something. He had received a video clip via their personal email. Lucy opened the email on her phone, located the message, and played the video. Despite its poor quality and short duration, it was clear what Lucy and Bill were doing in the bedroom. The sender was an anonymous address. Fred looked at the video on his phone, puzzled. Is that our bedroom? It's hard to tell, but it looks sunny, like midday. I'm not sure when that would be from. Lucy, knowing exactly what it was from Wednesday, responded calmly. I'm not sure, maybe it's edited, and they messed with the light. That is you, isn't it? Fred asked, observing Lucy in the video. You seem to be enjoying it. Lucy let the comment pass. She had more important things to worry about. She could explain her enthusiasm to Fred later as part of an act for Bill. What's Bill playing at? Is this what he wanted to discuss tonight? Is this just another form of torture? You didn't fall out or threaten him, did you? Fred's questions came one after another. Lucy immediately denied it, but then remembered telling Bill of her intention to stop things. Maybe he reacted badly and intended to use the video to keep things going. He must have set up a video at some point. He had plenty of opportunities over the past 2 days. Fred mentioned Bill wasn't at work, so he couldn't ask him. Lucy desperately wanted to contact him and still hoped to cover their activities in the previous few days. Just then, Lucy's phone pinged with an urgent "call me now" message from her sister Mandy. She told Fred she had better answer it, hoping it would give her some much-needed thinking time. She ended the call with Fred and dialed Mandy, only to be greeted by a barrage of questions and expletives. When Mandy finally paused for breath, Lucy managed to establish that her sister had received the same video clip. Her phone kept bleeping with attempted calls from most of her close friends, and even her mom. My God, had they all received the clip? This was an absolute disaster. There was no way Fred would do this to me. It had to be Bill. Lucy was furious. She tried calling Bill repeatedly, but couldn't get a reply. Unbeknownst to her, Fred had picked up Bill's phone at work during a conference meeting, removed the battery, and discarded it. He kept the handset and SIM card. Additionally, Fred left an envelope on Bill's desk, before making the call to Lucy about the video and quietly leaving work. When he got home, Fred thoroughly enjoyed watching his wife's angst and confusion. Lucy was distraught at the thought that her family and friends might think she was having an affair, especially her mom. Fred played along, offering various useless suggestions on how to limit the damage. He feigned confusion about when the clip could have possibly been taken. However, Lucy still wasn't admitting to Bill's midweek visit. Lucy, how had everything gone so horribly wrong? She had never entertained the idea of having an affair until that fateful night at the party, when she had a little too much to drink and flirted with Bill. He was charming, attractive, and clearly interested. Since that night, he had occupied her thoughts more often than she'd care to admit. Over the following weeks, she managed to justify to herself that she deserved some excitement, but she couldn't risk her marriage to Fred. She had seen a friend's marriage crumble after a similar affair was discovered, but she always considered herself smarter, believing her plan was a clever way to avoid all the pitfalls of getting caught. After all, how could Fred discover something he already knew about? Planning the details became part of the thrill for her. From her perspective, it was a perfect arrangement, but she never fully considered the impact on Fred. Now, she found herself in a world of pain. Everyone adored Fred, and now they would all know she had betrayed him. The thought of facing the consequences made her grimace. Nobody would believe that Fred was aware of her and Bill. However, none of that mattered as long as she could convince Fred that this wasn't her fault. Bill's arrival at Fred and Lucy's home was announced by screeching tires. He was met by Lucy's attempt to attack him, with Fred doing nothing to intervene, his cheek marked by an impressive scratch. After finally managing to pin Lucy against a wall to speak, Bill denied any involvement in the video, despite having heard about it. Lucy seethed, questioning who else could have done it. Amidst the tension, Fred burst into laughter. "I suppose that would be me," he admitted. Both Lucy and Bill were dumbfounded, but it was Bill who grasped the situation first. "So you found out about our meeting this week?" he asked. Fred confirmed, "Yes, unfortunately." Lucy attempted to justify the video as a continuation of their arrangement, but Bill realized the full implications. He knew they had discussed everything, suspecting Fred had recorded it all. Attempting damage control, he apologized to Fred, acknowledging his mistake. "I'm truly sorry, Fred. I couldn't resist Lucy. I never meant for this to hurt you so much. I made a big error in judgment and got carried away. I'll end the arrangement and overlook the financial irregularity." Fred replied, "Ah, that's very kind of you, but unfortunately, it's all a bit too late. You'll find my resignation on your desk." Lucy interjected, "You can't leave, Fred. How will we pay for the house?" "Don't worry about that, Lucy. It's going up for sale tomorrow," Fred assured her. Bill jumped in. "There's no need, Fred. We can put this behind us. I really need you at the firm. You know the business and the clients inside out." Fred smiled. "I suppose that's true. It's probably why your main competitor has offered me a job. I suspect some, maybe even most of the clients, will move with me. And you owe me more than the 4-week notice period, so I won't be coming back." Bill's fake smile faded as Fred continued. "I suspect a good portion of the workforce will follow me too. I've informed them of my departure, and many don't seem to believe you're capable of keeping the company afloat." Bill tried to rally. "You need to think this through, Fred. You could still go to prison." Fred chuckled. "Oh, I highly doubt that. Would you want to implicate your lover? She received half of the benefits of the fraud. Besides, you've committed blackmail, and thanks to our little conversation here, I have that admission on video. It's amazing what electronic devices you can buy these days. The recording is with my lawyer. And in addition, you might find some of your files have been accidentally deleted. I know you didn't back up anything remotely. It pays to have colleagues who enjoy working with you, but I suppose you wouldn't know that." Bill sneered. "That recording won't stand up in court." Fred responded, Interestingly, my lawyer echoed the same sentiment, but I can utilize it in other ways, and by the time it's resolved, you'll likely be out of business. On the bright side, my new firm might be interested in acquiring you. I hear their new chief operating officer is a decent guy. Lucy realized that Bill's business and money were in serious jeopardy. She decided to pin it all on Bill. Bill listened in disbelief as Lucy launched into an impressive act of a wronged woman. I love you, Fred. This was all Bill's idea. He made me do it. I admit I got confused and carried away, but I was just going along with it to save you from prison. I didn't really have a choice, and because of that, my life is in ruins. Please, Fred, I love you. Bill muttered, "You two-faced liar." Fred smiled at the rather apt description. "Ah, my dear loving wife. In addition to the video, you're overlooking the fact that I overheard you on the phone admitting this was all your idea, a rather elaborate and cruel cover for an affair. You'll find divorce papers in the envelope in the kitchen drawer. You're leaving tonight, and will agree to the terms of the divorce, or more of those video clips might find their way to family and friends. I'm sure your mom will love to hear that not only are you a cheating slut, but the extent to which you plotted and blackmailed." Lucy burst into tears and slumped to the floor. Fred looked at Bill. "Do you want to take her with you?" Bill replied, "Not a chance. More trouble than she's worth." Fred said, "Well, on that, we are agreed." Bill warned, "This isn't over, Fred." Fred replied, "That's true." With that, Fred swung for Bill. He wasn't sure who was more surprised as his fist crunched squarely into Bill's jaw, felling him on the spot. It's over now. Epilogue. Fred had listened to the recording countless times. Most of it was agonizing to hear, but he found himself drawn to the part where Bill and Lucy were fretting over whether he had discovered the truth and lost his sanity. The knife in the bonnet was delightfully melodramatic, and the act of it brought his first genuine smile in weeks. Taking up the new job with Bill's rival, Fred found himself quickly gaining customers and employees. Bill clung bitterly to his failing business, but eventually had to concede defeat, putting his firm into administration. Rumors swirled about personal bankruptcy, and shortly afterward, Bill moved away from the area. Lucy found herself in a small flat, using the money from the sale of their house as her sole income. With few qualifications or experience, she juggled 2 temporary jobs on 0-hour contracts, barely making ends meet. Former friends turned their backs on her, and her relationship with her family dwindled to barely a whisper. With his increased salary and bonuses, Fred was able to cut back to a 3-day work week, finally making time for the sports and outdoor activities he had neglected during his marriage. He hadn't realized how much Lucy had influenced his decisions, including buying a large house and filling it with possessions. Waste no time, he sold it off. Remaining in contact with Lucy's family, particularly Mandy, who repeatedly apologized for her sister's affair, Fred couldn't help but wonder what Mandy meant by suggesting she'd never make the same mistake. The thought of teasing out that meaning, especially to see Lucy's reaction, amused him greatly.